This session of our symposium focuses on COVID and the effect it's had on our services and the care we can provide to patients with tracheostomies. The session has got a selection of internationally recognised speakers, all at the top of their game. The first session is chaired by Aurora, who's a robotic head and neck surgeon from London, England. Asit is chairing a panel which includes surgeons and intensive care physicians who've been trying to manage their services in the pandemic. First is Vasiliou. He's a maxillofacial and oral surgeon working in the northwest of England. Leo is going to describe what's happened with the surgical services, how we've had to adapt during the pandemic, and how we're trying to catch up and keep patients safe and offer high quality care as an inpatient and an outpatient. Mr. Tony Jacob is an ENT surgeon working down in London. Tony was instrumental in putting together the COVID track audit project at the beginning of the pandemic to try and understand what was happening with tracheostomies and make sense of it from a surgical perspective to help people involved in tracheostomy insertion and to improve care for patients. Tony's going to describe what they did and some of the results from that project. Gonzalo Hernandez Martinez is an ICU consultant working in Madrid, Spain. Gonzalo has had a number of papers accepted in high-profile journals describing what happened in his collection of intensive care units in Spain. They were able to do some propensity matching and try and work out what was the best way of providing tracheostomy care in terms of who got a tracheostomy and when we got a tracheostomy. It'll be fascinating learning from Gonzalo, lessons from Spain. Next is our keynote speaker. Michael Rosen will be a name familiar to many of you. He's a poet, an author, and he's also been the Children's Poet Laureate in the United Kingdom, an accolade which is provided to the best poets in the land. Unfortunately, Michael contracted COVID early on in the pandemic and was admitted to a London hospital for a long time. He ended up with a tracheostomy. He kept a notebook at the end of his bed and he encouraged staff to write their thoughts and poems in this notebook. As part of Michael's recovery, he took those thoughts, notes and poems and turned them into a book. Michael's going to talk about his book, but also he talks really eloquently about the impact losing your voice can have on someone who's so dependent on communication as a way of life. So Michael will really bring to life some of those problems that our patients face on a daily basis. Michael's going to be interviewed by two school children from Manchester. Our next keynote is Professor Tim Cook. Tim is a consultant anaesthetist and intensive care consultant working in Bath in the southwest of the United Kingdom. Tim has many roles in airway management, but one of these roles was advising the Royal College of Anaesthetists. Tim took a step back from clinical work at the start of the pandemic, but he was incredibly busy reviewing the risks to healthcare workers and working really hard to make sure we had the standards, guidelines and information that we needed to provide safe care. Tim's agreed to provide a summary of those risks to healthcare workers. It'll be really interesting to hear what Tim has to say. So that's our second session at the ITS. I hope you find it interesting. Look forward to seeing you there.